All right, so hi everyone. My name is Haytham Elhawary, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of KINETIC. Just a quick summary of what KINETIC does. So KINETIC builds wearable devices to help reduce workplace injuries, mostly for the industrial workforce. And recently, we expanded the product to help protect workers during COVID with contact tracing and proximity alerts. And I'm joined today by Cormac Gilligan, who is the global VP of Environmental Health and Safety at PepsiCo. So, Cormac, good to see you again.
Hey, Haytham, thanks for having me. Yeah, Cormac Gilligan. I'm the Vice President of Environmental Health and Safety for PepsiCo globally, responsible for safety, well-being, environmental protection of our 250,000 employees and 250 plus manufacturing locations around the world, in addition to offices, R&D, and so on and so forth. So I've been with PepsiCo now almost 14 years in various parts of the world, but always leading EHS in some capacity.
That's great. Sounds like an easy job, Cormac. You have there just 250,000 people.
It's been fun.
So, Cormac, before we dive into your experience with wearables and just your digitization strategy in general around EH&S, I really am curious to hear, like, how has your sort of day-to-day work changed since COVID-19 struck? So, to give you a bit of an intro, about what's happening at my house. So, my kid is mostly doing virtual schooling. So, I recently bought a book which was called Science Experiments for Kids, which really led us down a rabbit hole. And so I've been doing wilder and wilder experiments with my 5-year-old, and actually my ceiling is sort of full of the debris of like rockets that we've made out of Alka-Seltzer and other cool things. Curious to hear what your day-to-day is like.
That's very cool. Yeah, I mean, we've been lucky in that our kids are a little bit older; they're teenagers, so they're more self-sufficient. But yeah, I mean, it's been interesting since March. Obviously, everybody's working from home, and from our perspective, it's been the technology has been phenomenal. It's worked brilliantly. I mean, even events like this, Haytham, where we're doing virtual, town halls, virtual meetings, virtual recordings. But it's also kind of, for me, the big thing has been the lack of travel, which has been fantastic, to be honest. I mean, just being able to not have to worry about, traveling around different parts of the world and the toll that takes on you that you don't actually realize until you stop doing it. And then you kind of see the value that you get out of not being constantly on the road. So as we kind of look to, step out of this or emerge out of this pandemic, that's something I'm going to try and make sure we, not just for me, but also for my team, that we maintain a certain level of realism around how much do we really need to be traveling around the world.
I know, I hear you. I've found it really efficient to sort of have a 15-minute Zoom meetings. I think I'm going to short Starbucks going forward and just take all my meetings virtually now. So Cormac, thanks for that. So, really where I wanted to start is, PepsiCo is one of, a handful of companies that have deployed sort of wearable devices within your safety area, at a pretty good scale. And so what I wanted you to maybe do is just tell us a little bit about that journey and sort of how you got to the place of sort of deploying wearables and how that sort of fits within a digitization strategy in general.
Yeah, so it kind of started for us with our global strategy on EHS. We defined about 3-4 years ago, and the vision for our strategy is beyond zero, pursue positive. So we wanted to set out a vision that kind of went beyond the traditional context of zero injuries. And so how do you develop programs and implement content for your frontline employees that really adds significant value to their, not just their core safety, but their wellness agenda as well. So part of that for us was looking at the digitalization. Part of our strategy, key plank of our strategy, was digitalization. So not just in terms of how we leverage our data platforms to report on a day-to-day basis, but what type of technology is out there or emerging technology is out there that we can go and scout for that could really help solve key problems that we're facing. One of those problems was ergonomics, and continues to be. A company like PepsiCo, a lot of lifting, a lot of manual handling, twisting and turning, high risk postures. We've always done all of the traditional, ergonomics work and try and do as much as we possibly can. But there was always something missing. There was always that kind of behavioral element that we never really tapped right into to create a sense of ownership in the mind of the individual employee, and help them, behave posturally in a different way. And so that was our starting point. Was we had this strategic plank in our strategy. We started looking for the technology. We found we had a problem to solve, right, for sure. And then we were able to connect with KINETIC and with you guys.
Yep, no, that's great. And what I remember when we first had those conversations was that you talked about sort of your experience with fleet telematics, right, and how it started sort of putting devices in vehicles, but then it very much became about the data, right? And that's what we sort of found with the wearables that we deploy is that, at the beginning, it's about the device and will people wear it? But it rapidly becomes about the data, right? And the decisions you can make around the data. So we'd love to hear, what your prior experiences were that sort of led to being able to sort of engage with wearables and sort of, wholeheartedly there.
Yeah, I mean, the whole telematics play for us was massive, and that was a game changer in our overall EHS agenda. It started as a safety play, but rapidly became a sustainability play and a sales play and everything else, because the data was so rich and so meaningful in so many different ways that it allowed us to go and look at all of the data coming from our telematics programs and slice it and dice it and use that analytics and insights in different ways. So to your point, Haytham, the telematics work started as a big effort to get all of these units installed in trucks in our fleet, and that then rapidly became, okay, that's not the game. The game here is the data, and how do you use the data to influence driver behaviors? It came to when a police officer stops you and asks you what speed you were doing, there's always a I wasn't speeding type of conversation. Whereas with the telematics, that conversation doesn't happen. It's the data, and the data is the data, and it becomes really, really powerful to be able to capture and correlate that big data, because you've got massive amounts of data being uploaded to the cloud on a minute-by-minute basis, and it's incredibly powerful from an organizational point of view to be able to take that data, analyze it very, very quickly, and put those insights into the hands of a supervisor who may have 10, 15 drivers working for them, put that data into their hands so that they can then go and have those coaching conversations or those counseling conversations or those congratulatory conversations with those drivers based on that data. And it's very, very powerful, and it's step changed completely our overall view on our safety performance from a fleet safety point of view. So then if you transfer that then, so that was our first kind of experience with big data and digitalized solutions like this. And we've been toying with other kind of ideas like bodysuits and exoskeletons and things like that. But the Ergo wearables was the next kind of big space that we stepped into in this regard, and it's exactly the same. It's an easier deployment for sure, but the data, the power, and the richness of the data that we get from an individual location or an individual shift about the nature of the high risk postures, when they were occurring, how they were occurring, was just incredibly insightful for us, and it gives us the basis to go and actually do a number of things. It allows us to engage with the employees in a way that we haven't before, which is them telling them wearing the device, right? And rather than us telling them you need to bend your knees or you're not lifting properly, the device does all of that. And so rapidly the employees started to feel that this is not a supervisory type of intervention. This is a technology intervention that's really helping them think differently. So that haptic enabled feedback, the vibration occurs, they stop, think about, what were they doing, and is there something they can do differently? And so the stacked win for us in that regard is that then they're having conversations with us about, well, why at that particular time I have to adopt a high risk posture, and can we redesign the work, or can we redesign the process? And that redesign suggestion is coming from the employee, not coming from us. So you've got culture change happening then at the same time, which is incredibly powerful, right? All off the back of a simple device with key data.
So Cormac, so after that experience of sort of deploying fleet telematics, if you could talk a little bit about what it was like to sort of deploy the wearable devices to sort of improve, worker biomechanics, in your manufacturing facilities.
Yeah. So as I said, the telematics was kind of our first foray into the whole world of digitalized data, and so the Ergo wearables was our second real foray into that space. And a much easier deployment, I would say, overall, because it's less technical. It's a wearable. It's much easier to manage and to deploy. The impact that it's had, though, has been 3, 4, 5-fold. I mean, so it starts off with us as a way of trying to solve for those traditional ergonomic risks that we see, and that drive some of our worker compensation costs. But then it becomes, the employees, it becomes an employee engagement exercise because they like the device, they want to wear the device. Where we started these off as a pilot, the idea was we were going to take the devices back after 12 weeks, and the employees were like, no, you're not taking them back, which is always a great win from an employee relations point of view. But also they were, where the data was giving us the insights into particular times of a shift or particular locations in a plant or in a distribution center. That was allowing us to go back then and engage with those employees and ask the questions about why, and identify work-related issues, process issues, or work design issues that then allows us to kind of work through the redesign of those with the employee. And in most cases, those solutions were coming from the employee, which is always what you want from a risk reduction point of view, is the employees telling you what the best way of mitigating the risk is. And so fundamentally what you have going on in the background is something that starts as a digitized analytics tool, which fundamentally starts driving culture change for you. And that's incredibly powerful. And that's something we've never had before with our Ergo program.
You sort of mentioned fleet telematics before. Like, one of the things we've heard is that, deploying wearables is almost like telematics for the worker, or telematics for the body, right? Where ultimately you're collecting data about how the body's moving. You're trying to understand when a worker's putting themselves at risk and if they can mitigate that. So absolutely, there's a lot of parallels in those. Of course, with wearables and asking workers to actually wear these devices, it's the hardest thing generally is just having them accept it, having them trust that you're going to use the data in the right way. Do you have any experience around sort of just worker acceptance and what the experience has been like, just getting the workers to wear it so you can get the benefits from the device?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's people generally have increasing concerns about technology, and what we see it with contact tracing technology for COVID-19. People are reluctant to allow their private cell phones be used and so on. And it's not that dissimilar, right? It's are you going to use this device to supervise me? Are you going to use it to counsel me? Is it going to be a productivity play? And I think for us, our approach to it has been very much sit down and have a very transparent, open conversation. I've never met anybody who's ever wanted to come to work deliberately to get injured. So, once people understand that this is an investment that we're making as an organization to help improve your work experience, and if there's a productivity gain and the output of this, that's an additional output. The primary objective here is to make sure we're not hurting and injuring people, and so I think it becomes an element of trust then, Haytham, as well, right? So it depends on your organizational culture, and I think thankfully in PepsiCo we have a very transparent, proactive culture. And people recognize that we're always trying to do something different, something additional to drive better performance, better safety performance. And so when we piloted, the results were incredibly, incredibly powerful. And like I said, people were reluctant to, you guys were happy because we need more devices, because we thought we were going to be able to rotate them, but we're not going to be able to do that.
You sort of mentioned the impact on culture, and our experience is, at the beginning, Cormac, I think I told you that we started calling on companies that had the highest injury rates, and we're like, well, these are the folks that need this technology the most, because they have incredibly high injury rates. Their workers are getting injured left, right, and center. It turns out that those aren't the people that want the product. The folks that want the product are people who have great safety cultures already, and this is really sort of the next step in that process of really getting injuries down to zero and helping prevent exposure to risk. So yeah, it's been very interesting to see that is sort of counterintuitive, right? As people with
you find that Haytham, with organizations. So organizations that have good, strong EHS cultures or quality cultures, will consistently look for. They're also the ones that tend to financially perform well and be innovative and creative. I can only speak for us, but I do feel that this context around technology and looking to continuously improve, the traditional methods and approaches of risk management have evolved. They've changed. For years, the industry has been talking about predictive analytics and leading indicators and so on and so forth. But what this technology gives you is predictive indicators in a way that's step changed beyond what the traditional model of the safety industry would have spoken about. And I think the Internet of Things was the start of that, and the industrial Internet of Things certainly. But now this is almost moving beyond that into, as you say, into the wearables world and into that digitized data that allows us to go and analyze things that in ways that we would never have seen before.
So Cormac, we obviously COVID hit, come March of this year. Like, how has that impacted your operations and just the challenge of keeping 250,000 strong workforce safe?
Yeah, it's been a fun couple of months, 6 months, 7 months. So it's our top priority has been obviously the safety of our employees. We've got our manufacturing teams, our sales teams continue to work. They were deemed essential workers, food and beverage workers, and so the priority shifted very rapidly to securing the right personal protective equipment for these employees, making sure we had the right protocols in place for managing people who had contracted symptoms. We've done a lot of work on testing strategies and so on. It's been relentless for the last 6 months. The focus of the organization has been, I would say, exclusively focused on making sure our employees are safe and that we're not putting anybody in harm's way. So it's been interesting from that point of view. It's almost like all of the traditional work we used to do, like the ergonomics work and the fleet safety work, and all of that continues. But on top of this additional layer of complexity and focus on COVID-19. So the teams across our organization have just done phenomenal work over the last 6-7 months to kind of maintain that focus, maintain our performance from a safety point of view, while being agile and embracing this whole new set of behaviors around COVID-19. And of course, it's impacted our deployment of things like the wearables, because people are not traveling as much. We're not, we're not sending people into our manufacturing plants unless there's a real business essential reason to do so. So we're still deploying, but the cadence of the deployment was impacted by that.
So, and then Cormac, I guess, to end on a sort of a note looking towards the future, we've often had conversations around sort of the role automation plays and some of the efforts around automation. Like, what are your thoughts on that front?
Yeah, I mean, I know a couple of years ago, a lot of conversations about, how we're going to have driverless fleet in the next 5 years and things like that. And we're still probably 5 years from driverless fleet.
If not more than that.
Yeah. So, I think the promise of technology is enticing and it's motivating for organizations, and it's very, very exciting. But the maturity is not always there in the technology when you start to actually, how do you replace or how do you layer technology in to solve for a particular problem? Now, having said that, we have, the automation agenda within our organization has step changed dramatically over the last 5, 6, 7 years. And so I'm sure lots of other companies are seeing the same thing where you have automated warehouses occurring, automatic storage and retrieval systems. We have a lot of cobotics now arriving into our manufacturing locations. So, and it's not the nature of work is changing in certain circumstances, and so that's something we have to be cognizant of as well, and make sure we're training people to adopt to that changing nature of work. But technology is we're going to continue to see significant step change in industry embracing technology, and I don't see that slowing down. I see it accelerating, and I think solutions like what we're talking about, integrating wearable technology with your workforce is going to be a fundamental part of that future kind of space of automation.
Yeah, and so my experience is sort of similar. I have a PhD in robotics, and I remember when I finished, I was predicting 2020 we would have driverless fleets and warehouses that would just have engineers in them fixing the robots, and obviously my prediction was slightly off, but yeah, I agree. I mean, from our perspective, like, we think that until automation is more mature and can take over more jobs, like, really the opportunity now is to provide technology and combine it with the existing workforce. So you're almost like augmenting your existing workforce as opposed to sort of replacing them. And I think that trend will last for at least another 20 years, and we'll see, workers wearing more and more devices on their bodies, sort of wearing portable computers essentially, which will have smaller and more discrete form factors, but really enhancing safety, enhancing productivity. And so I think this reality of sort of the connected worker or connected workforce is going to be something we'll be talking about, and we're just starting. So we'll be talking about that, I'm sure, for the next 10, 20 years.
Fully agree. Yeah.
Great. Well, Cormac, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
Likewise. Thanks, Haytham.